Thank you for being at this Cabinet meeting. This is the first full formal Cabinet meeting, so I'd like to welcome Councillors Lashmi Atawar and Councillor Eleanor Stringer. I know we had a very short one just after the annual council meeting. That is always a very, very short one. This is hopefully a longer Cabinet meeting. We have apologies from Councillor Kelly Broad. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. Our last meeting was that short meeting. Nevertheless, we still need to approve the minutes. Are they approved on the 15th of May? Yes. Thank you. We move on to item 1, reducing single-use plastics in council buildings task group report. Before I go to Councillor Mark Allison, I'll ask Councillor Aidan Mundy to open up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for this evening. So I just briefly want to touch on 2 or 3 minutes, just some background to the report and say some thanks and also some next steps. So the report itself was commissioned under the chairwomanship of Councillor Atawar when she was chair of the Sustainable Communities panel. And I think it's the local answer to a national global problem. We know that there are 2.26 million tonnes of plastic in the UK deposited every single year, and we know it's going to grow. And there is Merton has a strong history of doing what it can on these really, really important issues. And the report makes, I think, some quite striking changes in terms of sort of changing behaviours. So, for example, changing how we measure procurement, so that we are fully aware when we procure something the social impact on plastics. And I'd just like to thank those officers that supported the report today. It's obviously Stella Attigan and Mark Humphreys for their support, and also the 171 staff who were surveyed throughout and fed back in to the report and helped develop some of the particular recommendations, for example, around the recycling of food waste and other elements about the reports. And sort of next steps, the recommendations 8, 9 and 10 identify that the Sustainable Communities Task Group will continue to review and keep under their close eye what we are doing on plastics. But I think there's some fantastic opportunities there. Recommendation 4 about supporting local businesses and seeing how we grow this beyond the walls of the council. What more can be done out in the community so that we as a borough can do more to reduce our plastics impact. Take any questions anyone has.
Thank you very much, Councillor Aidan Mundy. Thank you for the report of your chairing of the task group. Can I ask Councillor Mark Allison to add?
No, I'd like to echo thanks to all of those involved with the report from Councillor Mundy for chairing the task group. I think that the need to tackle the overuse of plastics and the sort of disposable culture a lot of people have, that's something that we all recognise and we need to more about as a society. We have responsibilities as individuals, as consumers, and we have responsibilities as a council. And we also want the wider community to take responsibility for what they do as well, and to remember the importance where they can of reusing things and thinking about the impact that their consumption has on global affairs, climate change, and so forth. Reusing is a big part of that. I want to do more to encourage our staff to take those sorts of initiatives, and overall we really welcome the report and think there's some good ideas in here that we need to get on with to get people to change their behaviour and to improve the amount that, to reduce the amount of plastic that goes to waste across the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Allison. Any of the directors, Caroline Holland, did you want to add anything? Okay, thank you. Any questions from Cabinet members either to Councillor Mark Allison or to Councillor Mundy? I think this is a very good report, an excellent report. I'm also, Councillor Mundy, very keen on encouraging local businesses to join the London Mayor's refill programme. and we'll do all we can to make that encouragement and have a communication programme that reaches out to the 8,000 businesses here in the London Borough of Merton. Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
We now move to the recommendations as per the report, which are recommendations A to C. Are they agreed? Thank you very much. We have two items that we will be taking at a later cabinet meeting. That's items 5 and 6, and so therefore we now move on to item 7, Diabetes Action Plan and Annual Public Health Report. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Toby Byers, who has a guest for us as well. Councillor Byers.
Thank you, Chair. There's a bundle of documents here which have excerpts included in the appendices and links to the full documents online. So the primary document is the annual report of the Director of Public Health, which is a statutory requirement to produce. And I'd like to thank Dagmar and her team for the report that's before us. The annual report this year focuses on diabetes. And diabetes, we know, presents a huge issue for the NHS. It consumes around 10% of the entire NHS budget. And you might wonder why Dagmar, as Director of Public Health, chose to focus on diabetes, because we tend to think of it as a very clinical issue. But actually, much of diabetes is eminently preventable and often linked to the environment we live in and the choices we make, how we travel, how we eat and drink. And for that reason, the social dimension is as important as the clinical one, because it's the environment, much of which the Council has control over, which shapes many of these decisions. I'm going to leave Dagmar to focus on the detail of her report and just talk briefly about some of the wider work that the Health and Wellbeing Board has done over the past 18 months or so. The board chose back in 2017 to focus on diabetes in 2017-2018, and that was a result of two clinicians coming to the board and making a very passionate argument for the council to take a far more active leadership role, because they felt powerless as clinicians, with people presenting to them often far too late, and all they were then able to do was help people manage their conditions. We developed what we called the Diabetes Truth Programme, where each member of the board was buddied up with an expert witness, who was someone who had lived experience of diabetes, either type 1 or type 2, or caring for someone with diabetes. And I'm delighted that one of our expert witnesses is here this evening, and I'll ask him to say something in a second. Over the course of several months, each board member met with their buddy several times, and the idea was for us as board members in a position to actually influence change, to understand what someone with lived experience of diabetes felt could have helped them to develop or not to develop the condition in the first instance. And this led to the Tackling Diabetes Action Plan, which is a collaborative plan developed jointly between the Council and the CCG, taking a whole system approach in recognition that the solution to tackling diabetes is not just a clinical one, but a social one too. And the action plan has £1.2 million of additional funding from the CCG pledged to it over a 3-year period. The action plan was launched in April, where we also launched the inaugural Merton Mile, which was an idea put forward by Environment and Regeneration. It's a 1-mile signposted route around Fix Marsh, which encourages everyone to lead an active lifestyle. Dagmar and I also spoke at the recent South West London Clinical Conference on the work that the Health and Wellbeing Board has done on diabetes, and it was very well received and something that I know a number of others are looking to potentially copy. So I just want to end by reiterating my thanks to Dagmar and her team, and Dagmar will say something in a second, to all of the Health and Wellbeing Board, but mostly to the expert witnesses who gave up their time to share their experience with us. And I'd like to invite Nicky up to the microphone to just share some of his thoughts on the programme.
Does this work?
Press the middle button. Thank you.
I'm Nicky, and I'm obviously diabetic. And as I'm on the Truth Programme, I better tell the truth. As some of you know, I'm an ex-military veteran, Stephen does, and a fairly veteran, as you can see. And I came out of the army with two problems. One was an alcohol problem, which hopefully I solved 26 years ago. If you want to applaud, now is the time. And the other, I have PTSD, which I didn't know when I came out, but I now know because all the information is there. And by the way, this is why I congratulate you, because you're getting the information that's needed about this problem, because that's half the battle. And I'm one of the originals from the buddy-buddy system. I love that buddy-buddy expression, and so does Trump. And so it's been a great help, mainly because it enabled me to share with other people the problem that I've got. As I say, I've got a continuing problem. I haven't had a drink for 26 years, but PTSD will live me until my dying day. So I have to live with that. I also married a German. She voted Remain. I voted Brexit. And so I have a continuing problem, which will be solved in October. But I don't want to come here and just talk rubbish. I just want to share what has helped me with any of these problems. And as you hear, I've got several. If you want to swap, by the way, we're quite happy. But with diabetes or any of these other addiction problems, because I see it in a way as an addiction, because the way I eat is addictive. I need sugar all the time. I eat Mars bars all the time. I don't tell my German wife, but this is part of it. It's an addiction. It's a food addiction. And that's part of my diabetes. I had a wonderful expression the other day, stop living in the problem and start living in the solution. And the solution for me, if I can share it with you, is that what helped initially in the buddy-buddy system was just talking about it. Because with so many of these problems, people don't discuss their problems. And that was the first step, I think, when you had this system, to enable us to discuss the problems and see and hear from other people how they deal with it. And it's the same with PTSD. As Stephen knows, I'm partly solving this problem by starting a choir with ex-veterans. And believe it or not, when I go and sing with these veterans, an hour or two later we feel completely different. And I don't feel like a Mars bar or a whiskey. Because we're talking all the time about mood changing. We all want to feel better. When we get up in the morning, we want to feel better. When we go to bed, we want to feel we've had a good day and we've done something useful. So I congratulate all of you for being here, and I just want to share this idea. A year or two back, we had a wonderful meeting for diabetics at the Wimbledon Guild. Sadly, that finished. I don't know why. I went there today to find out why, and they didn't know why. But that was extremely successful. Very good people. And again, it was all about us sharing with each other. How do you cope with it? We all have different ways of doing it. But the very fact that we're sharing is the beginning of the process of recovery. Now, I did my homework today on the internet. And in the borough, unless I'm wrong, there's only one meeting, a diabetic meeting in the borough, which is in Rains Park. Only one meeting. And I saw in your report that there are 11,000 diabetics in the borough. One meeting for 11,000 diabetics. It's not enough. And another 18,000, I believe, in your statistics in the next 5 years. So may I make a plea? If I had more time, I'd certainly like to be involved in this, because getting these meetings going, like we had at the Guild, it was very, very successful. And it's not just a question of money. I know that's important. But we're talking about human beings, human lives. And at that wonderful buddy-buddy meeting, I was sitting next to a woman whose son had type 1 diabetes. And it was a horror story, frankly, a horror story. So this is a problem, an issue that can be dealt with. And part of the solution, trust me on this one, is to run these sort of meetings, get people together, share the ideas, and particularly with veterans, by the way. It's very difficult for a veteran to say they've got a problem, because we're disciplined not to share the fact we've got problems. So this is the battle, half the battle, to get people to share that they have the problem of diabetes. But to do that, we need places to go. So well done, all of you, and thank you for the work you're doing. And I'm still alive. And hopefully, by sharing what keeps me alive, will help to keep others alive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. And thank you for being here yourself. I'll hand over to Toby for the remainder of his talk. I don't know whether you wanted Dagmar to come in.
I'll let Dagmar come in, but just to thank Nikki again for that talk. And Nikki was actually paired with Councillor Lewis Lavender, and I know she very much enjoyed the discussions that you had together, and I think we've all got a flavour of those discussions this evening. So thank you again, and thank you to all the other buddies for taking the time to be part of that programme, and hopefully colleagues have seen some of what we took from those discussions. I'll let Dagmar pick up on the detail of her report.
So thank you very much and good evening. I will focus a little bit on the key messages of the annual report because that is my statutory duty, and I recommend that you endorse it. And the idea to choose diabetes for all the other issues I could have chosen is precisely what Tobin said. We need to bundle our energy rather than fritter it away. So I could have chosen all sorts of fancy things. There's plenty out there. But what we wanted to do is grab one of the problems, tackle it from all angles, and then learn from it. That's the sort of basic. And so the main messages from the annual public health report, I think there's a colourful wheel that hopefully summarises it well. Isn't anything new, but it is nevertheless important to have it sort of in a potted version. So number one, diabetes is a real problem. Although it doesn't show, so if you meet Nicky in the street, it isn't written on his forehead, he's got it. And the complications are horrible. There are amputations, blindness, and other gruesome stories. And we can't just close our eyes. Our GPs, as they came to our Health and Wellbeing Board, cannot stop the epidemic. They can treat those that come through the door, but they can't help new cases coming up. And the important message is that why is it increasing so much? And we know all that diet is really important, physical activity is important. So you could draw the conclusion and say, well, people just have to pull up their socks a bit more self-discipline. Have they all got greedier or lazier? And that is not the answer. Of course, people haven't got greedier and lazier. What has happened is our environment has changed. And if you observe yourself as you rush into in the morning and you took a diary and said, what are you actually eating? What is actually your physical activity? And one of the buddies, it was really striking. He knew that he had diabetes, he had family history, he was all tuned in, and then he changed his work. And he wanted to make an impression, and it was new. And the environment didn't allow him to eat a healthy diet. And he piled on the pounds. Although he knew it all, he couldn't help it because the environment was really against him. So the learning is that people aren't greedier or lazier. We have to do something about the root causes. We have to make the healthy choice easier. That's a really fundamental thing. And the other learning was that we have to really work hand in hand by creating better services. Of course we need to, and the CCG has put their hands in the pocket, as Tobin said. Mental health issues, people sharing their experiences, social prescribing, all around better service provision, but it has to go hand in hand with working with the local government and their levers. Look at Mitcham High Street, how easy is it? I cycle, but the cyclepaths start and then they stop and then you're in the middle of traffic, so there is a lot more we could do. So that is the main message. By working together and pulling all our energy, we can tackle a problem. And the humility to say, actually, we don't have all the solutions. So we need to learn as we go along. And therefore I'm so grateful for Nikki to say, rub it in our face. He Googled it, there's only one group. Actually, luckily in the Diabetes Action Plan, I was sort of thinking, oh God, there are a number of new initiatives, particularly bringing people together around specific issues that they have raised, around mental health, around cooking. So more is in the pipeline, but we do need people like Nikki to continuously work with us so that we have an ongoing challenge and can learn and improve.
Thank you very much. Tony, did you want to come back before I go to the Cabinet? But first, Hannah, did you want to add anything? Any Cabinet contributions? Councillor Edith Macaulay.
Thank you. I want to say I'm a type 2 diabetic, and I'm not obese. I had what the gentleman said. Mine is a family hereditary thing. My mother was a diabetic, so I took a particular interest in diabetes. And when I was the mayor of Merton in 2002-03, it was one of my charities. I raised quite a lot of money, and I opened a foot surgery in Kingston Hospital, which is named after me. If you go to Kingston Hospital, you'll see, because they were going to close that section of the hospital, and I raised a lot of money for them to do that. And I'm really interested in terms of people from ethnic background, because one of the things that we have done in the borough in terms of diabetes has been really good over the last few years, because people from South Asian, African, Caribbean people do suffer from diabetes, type 2 diabetes by the way, because of the food they eat. And the way we've done the first report, which was presented to the JCC when Councillor Julie Louis Lavender was there, was quite helpful, and a lot of the voluntary sector, has spread the news around. I think one of the voluntary sector was ADECO, and they had a seminar, at the Vestry Hall, where they had a lot of people who had the disease came and spoke about, the way they eat and how they tackle the problem. So I think this is a very good report, and I think we should continue to do more work and try and spread the news to our ethnic people in the borough, because we do have about 37% of ethnic minority people in the borough of Merton, and I think we should continue to work with these organizations to let them aware, because when you listen to what people say, I was really amazed as a diabetic myself when I had what people eat, a day, and some of them don't do any exercise at all, and it was sort of not, some of them did not even know they had diabetes until they became ill and they went to their GPs, and the report that was done was so good that it was shared amongst everyone, and they knew how to tackle the problem. And I think we should really spread the news amongst other people, and I think we should take this report back to the JCC so that they know we are working hard to solve this problem.
Thank you very much. Any more Cabinet contributions? Thank you very much. We're on to our recommendations, which represent A and B, which is to receive and endorse the annual Public Health Report 2019, Tackling Diabetes in Merton, Learning from a Whole System Approach. To thank Dagmar and Councillor Tony Riley in particular, and to note the Merton Health and Wellbeing Board's work on diabetes and the attached Tackling Diabetes Action Plan 2019 to 2024. Thank everyone for this excellent report. Are those recommendations agreed, A and B? Agreed. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 8, private rented property licensing. Councillor Martin Melton.
Thank you, Chair. As colleagues are aware, the private rented sector is increasingly of concern to many people living here in Merton. Whilst we have many good landlords in the borough, we also know there is a level of bad landlords here as well. It's also an issue that has received a lot of coverage within the media, and I think it's something we are well aware of, and it's an increasingly growing issue given that 25% of properties in this borough are in the private rented sector. So firstly, in terms of the recommendations, it's to approve the case for using the income from civil penalties, rent repayment orders and revised mandatory HMO licensing scheme so as to build capacity within the housing enforcement team in order to meet statutory requirements, to to actually approve the civil payments and rent repayment order policy, also in terms of the housing enforcement policy, but also as well in terms of further work to be undertaken in terms of a selective licensing scheme. Many London boroughs have successfully rolled out selective licensing schemes within their borough. As an authority, we don't have one yet, but this gives the go-ahead for further work to be undertaken in wards that have a high number of privately rented properties, but also as well where there's also issues in relation to antisocial behaviour, environmental issues, and where there are large numbers of HMOs in an area. A selective licensing scheme would require all private landlords within a designated area to actually be properly licensed. They also as well include a range of requirements aimed at ensuring that properties are safe and are managed in a satisfactory way. If we had this tool available to us, it would also help us to better regulate the private rented sector and uplift standards of management within an area. For any scheme to come into existence, it would last for 5 years, and there is also a fee payable. You will see, colleagues, in relation to the report on page 56, the number of private rented sector housing in each ward. It has to be above 21% for a licensing scheme to be introduced, though we can actually break that down below ward levels if there is areas which are in excess of that. The law is actually also very clear in terms of the criteria that we can undertake. So what this report, along with the EU enforcement policy, gives the authorisation for further work to be undertaken on selective licensing. As an authority, we need that additional capacity for full study, but also as well in terms of the full data analysis work to be undertaken. If we are to have a selective licensing scheme, there needs to be evidence there in order to actually implement one in terms of Merton. It is fair to say that it is a concern to many members who have been faced with substandard HMO conditions within this ward. Therefore, I ask Cabinet tonight to approve this policy to introduce the new civil penalties and enforcement policy, but allow further work to be undertaken on the selective licensing scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And just to remind ourselves, this is one of our manifesto commitments from the local elections of 2018. And thank you, Councillor Welton, for playing through this with a fine-tooth comb and looking to see how other councils have successfully introduced these selective licensing schemes. I'm just looking at the director involved in this issue and whether Steve Land also wants to say anything.
I think that was
okay, thank you. So Councillor Welton has given us the go-ahead to agree these recommendations. Are there any comments from Cabinet members on this paper that commits to one of our major manifesto commitments? Thank you. So, as a council and as a cabinet, we're now faced with item 8, private rented property licensing, to agree recommendations 1 to 7, which would, in the fullness of time, lead to a licensing scheme in selective areas for this borough of Merton. Are those agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We now move on to item 8, Children's Safeguarding Partnership Agreement. Councillor Kelly Broad has given her apologies, but her excellent director, Rachel Wardell, is here.
Thanks very much, Stephen. So you have in front of you this evening the proposals for the new Safeguarding Children Partnership arrangements. For many years now, the governance for multi-agency safeguarding practice to keep children safe from harm has been through the local Safeguarding Children Board, known as the Merton Safeguarding Children Board, the MSCB. But under a new Act of Parliament, the Children's Social Work Act of 2017, that was followed by new Working Together guidance in 2018, a set of recommendations were made to change the way that multi-agency safeguarding partnership arrangements worked. The core changes were principally to focus the partnership on 3 statutory partners, that is the local authority, the CCG and the police, with other interested parties not being statutory partners but being co-opted by the statutory partners to engage in the arrangements. And so what you have before you is a set of partnership arrangements that have been led by those 3 statutory partners, ourselves, the police and the CCG, extensively discussed with the local safeguarding board members, that is of the previous governance arrangements, to ensure that we maintain good relationships with all those partners who work so closely with us to safeguard children, and in particular to engage our schools, without whom we really can't do good safeguarding practice. So these were extensively consulted with the current board members, secured the agreement, unanimous agreement of the current board members for these revised arrangements around the 3 statutory partners. And now what you have before you is the recommendation of the current board to adopt these partnership arrangements. They are going through a similar process in the governing bodies of the CCG and in the police command.
Very much. And I understand there's a young scrutiny as well, Alice?
I'm very happy to say a little bit more about the scrutiny arrangements. So the arrangements include a independent person who will be the chair of the new partnership arrangements, and it's a requirement of the Act to have scrutiny, independent scrutiny. So there is a role for an independent scrutineer, which will be advertised, and unusually Merton has chosen to engage a young person alongside the independent scrutineer, so we will have young people's scrutiny of our safeguarding arrangements as well. Thanks for the reminder.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're really looking forward to that new post. Any cabinet member contributions on this excellent way forward? Thank you. We are one of the top 10 local authorities for the way in which our children's services safeguards our children in this borough, and we need to be proud of that, and I'm sure we all are. It's one of the biggest inspections of any local authority throughout the country, and local authorities' reputation is actually bound within this Ofsted inspection of children's services. And we're really, really pleased that our last inspection we were good with outstanding in 3 features, and we're very pleased with that. I want to thank our children's director and obviously Kelly Braun, but previously the cabinet member for children's services, Councillor Katie Neal. Okay, so we're on item 9, Children's Safeguarding Partnership Agreement. Recommendation A, is that agreed? Thank you very much. We now move on to item 10, 2019 Resident Survey Results. Councillor Mark Harris.
Thank you, Leader, and I'd like to start by just commenting on the process. We're one of those councils that thinks it's very important to do annual surveys. This is a really good indication about how residents think their community is, and also how well they think we're doing in the job that we do. So I think the process of doing resident surveys is extremely helpful to us. It also helps us to decide the council's priorities in future years, and make particularly difficult decisions when we have to decide what to do with resources when the government cuts our funding. It means that we can prioritise, help us to make decisions about which services to prioritise, which ones to cut the least when we have to cut as much as we're having to do. So I'd like to start by thanking everybody who's been involved in the process. I'd particularly like to thank our council officers, Chris Witherington. I'd like to thank you for all the hard work that you do every time on this annual survey. Very important and useful work. I'd like to thank DJS Market Research, who were appointed to carry out the research and to provide the analysis for us. And also, most importantly, I'd like to thank the 1,000 adults who were chosen to be representative of the local borough, and also the 271 young people who took part in the survey. It's very good to have so many people so interested in the local community to give their views, and I'd like to thank all of them. terms of the findings, it was a particularly interesting set of results this year, and gives us a lot to be proud about, but also to be thoughtful and humble about. You see, the overall figures remained on the whole very good and well above the benchmark figures for the rest of the LGA for the rest of the country. We experienced particularly positive feedback on services that relate to some of our top objectives in terms of helping to make Merton a great place for families. So really great and promising results around how good an education is provided locally. That's really positive there. On the leisure facilities that people enjoy in the borough, and on people's feelings around crime in the borough. Very good figures on that. However, we also have to recognise that there were concerns raised and satisfaction issues around what we'd like to call maybe the street scene services. And I think that there's an appreciation from us that they were likely to be impacted by the introduction of an entirely new waste collection service. We've seen it in other boroughs where they've brought in a new system, particularly something on wheel bin collections, where there's obviously a number of people who are very resistant to wheeled bins being brought in. And that's hit our figures across a range of services, and also has provided us with some data as to reasons that people might be less satisfied than before is connected to the waste collection. It's also drawn attention to things that have probably been existing for some time, but people have noticed more because the waste collection services has come forward. So particularly looking at the massive growth in fly tipping across the country over the last 5 or 10 years, where I believe the amount of fly tipping has gone up by about 50% in the last 4 or 5 years. That's affected us in Merton as well, and those figures are now starting to, the figures that we've experienced now start to relate to that. Going to specific figures, let's highlight a few. Overall satisfaction with the council has increased despite everything. It's up to 70% and is well above the LGA benchmark. The vast majority of Merton residents are satisfied with their local area as a place to live. That's at 89%. And that's higher. That's 11 percentage points higher than the national benchmark. Also notice that compared to the rest of the country, Merton residents are much more likely to feel positive about their well-being than elsewhere. Amongst service users, there was a significant increase in satisfaction with education, libraries, leisure and sports facilities. I think in terms of how we, in previous years, how we've, some of the most important figures that we've looked at have been what people think are their greatest concerns. And that's helped us to prioritise services. So, for instance, in previous years, the issue of congestion has been raised with us, and that has affected our approach to car traffic and vehicle traffic in particular. It's led to things like the introduction of greater policing on yellow boxes, measures to increase public transport, the diesel levy, things like that have been much more of a concern. And this year, although we might have thought that it would be on other things because of the concerns about the street scene, actually the thing that residents have said is their biggest concern is affordable housing and the lack of affordable housing. And that ties in, I think, with a lot of what we heard during the election campaign last year, and we've noticed more and more. And it's a very difficult problem for us to start to address, particularly with Brexit causing harm to the housing market and maybe making developers less willing to invest. And also, it might also be that Brexit is going to create a challenging environment for developers to achieve high levels of viability, which means that we would get a lot of affordable housing. So that will be a challenge for us, but it is something that we're determined to see more affordable housing brought into to the borough. So those, I would say, are the key conclusions that we should draw from here. The survey is extremely helpful to us. It helps us to focus our minds and to respond. But it also is a cause of some satisfaction to us that the top priorities that we have around making Merton a great place for families are being felt by our residents. And as time goes on, we would also want to monitor and see whether things that have been a concern this time continue and what we need to address in the coming years. So I'd like to thank everybody involved. I really recommend this report. It's very helpful to us.
Thank you very much. I'd like to add my thanks to Chris Withington over there for his sterling work, and I'm very proud of this borough that we continue to undertake this annual resident survey that compares us with other local authorities and the London scene. Do the directors want to add anything? Any cabinet contributions? Councillor Cooper Marbert.
Thank you, Chair. I was very pleased when I saw the results for the schools, and I know we have a new cabinet member, so I'm not taking away from her, but I just wanted to mention the increase in scores for both primary and secondary school, and then also with my new portfolio that includes libraries and sports. I can also see that there are good schools for those areas, and thanks to Nick River, obviously, and I'll do my best to make sure that there's continuing improvement. But coming back to education, I say thank you to Rachel, and hope that she will take that back to her staff as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edith McCauley.
I don't know if I'm a bit confused. I think, I know you mentioned the cluster and all that, but I would have liked to see, word by word, to see how we're making progress on crime and also the changes that have been made through the street cleaning issue. Because it is very important that we see which ward we can concentrate on, because we have a priority in terms of community safety, you know, which are the priorities, the wards which we have to look at. But probably I have missed out on something, but I can't see it in this report.
So page 10 of the report is the local area satisfaction rate. I'm really pleased that there's a resident from Ravensbury here. The Ravensbury residents are the most satisfied at 96%. That's page 10, which is very, very satisfying for me as a Ravensbury councillor. So yes, these are lessons that we will take on board area by area, cluster by cluster, as we pile through this. So as Councillor Addison said, this gives us food for thought, it gives us learnings, it gives us satisfaction, but it gives us concerns as well about some of the responses. Let's not forget this was indicated in a survey of 1,000 residents face to face and 271 young people around February and March when we introduced one of the bigger shake-ups of the waste service. But yes, we will endeavour to look at the area by area learnings. Any other cabinet members? Okay, this is a report that allows us to delve into a number of issues that residents have raised with us. The questions are standing questions asked throughout all local authority questions, so that there can be that comparison with other local authorities. So we're on our last item. It's 8:02. It's item 10. It's annual residence survey, with huge thanks again to Chris Withington. Recommendation A, that we note the results of the annual residence survey, and that obviously we will act on those. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. That concludes our meeting. Thank you.